Hello everyone, welcome to this video discussion on the history of the English language. Our focus this time is Old English period. So in this video discussion, I will be talking about what happened in the Old English period and what significant changes have contributed to the evolution of the English language, which led to the modern English language version that we use now. Before anything else, let's talk about the different sources in spelling. So we have different sources and spelling for the Old English period. And these sources of Old English culture include recipes. We have charms, riddles, mostly oral literature. We also have descriptions of saints' lives and epics. For example, we have the famous epic Beowulf. And then we also have categorizations of the Old English texts. We have those that are geographic in nature. For example, we have Northumbrian, we have Mercian, West Saxon, and Kentish. We have also categorizations of Old English texts based on time, whether they were written in early or late Old English. So when you see Old English texts, they do not necessarily mean that they belong in the Old English text generally. That means we can say that we have two categories for this. We have those that are written in the early times of the Old English period and those that were written in the later times of the Old English period. And in terms of form, there are only two categories for this. We have those texts which are poetry in nature, which have specific measurements, and we also have those that are written in prose form. Where are these texts available? Now, Old English texts are available in various sources. There were scribes who copied and illustrated the manuscripts which really worked mainly in, or manuscripts which really worked mainly in monasteries. And these manuscripts are often exquisite works of art. These manuscripts were also written on vellum, a very expensive thin leather. And some sources of these Old English texts were from books owned by monasteries, churches, or wealthy individuals. We also had facsimile editions. So in the modern times, if we have the scanned versions of our books or the e-books, before there were facsimile editions to give audience or readers an exact picture of the reading material, even if it was just a copy. A facsimile edition was an exact copy of written materials. It enabled people to see what the text looked like because it's just a replication of the source. And it was an accurate replication because, as much as possible, the replication was the same in terms of scale, color, condition, and other material qualities. So this is an example of a facsimile edition of a page from the famous epic titled Beowulf. So if you can see here, the way the text was written, its color, its pictures, its texture, all of them are present in this facsimile edition. The reason being is for the readers to have the feels of how it is to read the exact reading material. So even if they did not really have the actual copy of the Beowulf, but with this facsimile edition, they had the feels of reading the actual literary piece. We also had modified Roman alphabet. Now, most Old English texts, especially manuscripts such as Beowulf, used modified Roman alphabet. This alphabet was introduced by Irish missionaries, and the letter shapes are not identical to those that we use in the modern English. Even if we have Roman alphabets being used now, but the Roman alphabets that were used before in the Old English texts were modified. That is why there were some differences in terms with how Roman alphabets used in the Old English were compared to the Roman alphabets that we use in the modern time. Take a look for this because they can definitely tell you of these differences. For example, you have here the spelling of these modified Roman alphabets, and I'm pretty sure if you happen to read a sample of an Old English text, then you can see these symbols used there, okay, these alphabets. So we have here and their corresponding names. So this symbol was named Ash, and then this one was named or labeled Thorn. This one is F, this one is Yog, this one is Win or Wen. But these two, the W symbols, we didn't have exact labels or names for them before. And then we had the symbols ampersand. Okay, but for this one, there was no exact label. But in terms of the sound, you could see here that this one was really pronounced as with how the modern English pronounce this sound. It's a, as in the word what, okay, the a sound. And then this one, the theta symbol, was used or was pronounced as either soft th or hard th sound, such as in the word that. So if you could see a text like this written before, that is read as that, okay? And then we also have this one, and then this one could also be hard or soft th. Now, there was no exact difference or distinguishing factor between the two, but this one is more of a soft th, while this one is more of a hard th. So if this one is spelled as this way, using the thorn symbol, that means this could have been read in the modern English as that, while this one is read as that, okay? And then we have this one, mostly the J sound, okay, yod symbol, as in many, okay, many, as in the E sound here. And then we have the win or the when, okay, for the W sound, okay, we. And then we have here W, literally. So now it's pronounced as the W sound. So we have work, work. It's just that this one is really prolonged, okay? And then we also have other modified Roman alphabets used here. Now this one could also be best exemplified in the text of Beowulf, okay? Most Old English texts, especially manuscripts such as Beowulf, use a modified Roman alphabet. This alphabet was introduced by Irish missionaries, and the letter shapes are not identical to those of the modern English. For instance, we have the A, which is called ash, a runic letter, this one, which is called thorn, and then this one, which is called F. The last two are used interchangeably, okay? So if you notice this one, we have the thorn and the F. In the modern times, we know that for this symbol with the soft and the hard th, but before they were used interchangeably. Originally, a W was written as one U or two U symbols, okay? Hence the term W. But it is also written using a runic symbol, this one, which is called win or when. Capital letters are often absent, as are most punctuation marks. Abbreviations are also frequently used. Example, this one, which stands for the word N, okay, ampersand, as does this symbol to save space and effort. Okay? Now, there have been also preservation efforts. In addition to manuscripts, Old English is preserved in carvings on wood and stone from the 7th century. Because of this, there have been a lot of modern evidences which will point out that there were really preservation efforts done before to preserve old manuscripts, which were carved on wood and stone. And then we also have the runic alphabet, or we call it as Fulthorpe, which was in use through large areas of Europe and is probably an adaptation of the Etruscan or Phoenician alphabet. So this one here that you can see here is an example of a runic alphabet. Okay? So this is an example of a runic alphabet. Now let's talk about Old English sounds. So for the Old English sounds, this one is actually taken from the line of an Old English text. Okay, but obviously here, if you take a look at this word, you can see that there's a letter F here. But you know what? The F here is actually for the word heaven. Okay, wherein the letter V, okay, of heaven is written as an F in heaven. Okay, this one is called voicing. There have been remnants of this voicing phenomenon, okay, wherein V is pronounced as F. Okay, so instead of saying V, it was pronounced as F, such as in the word wife, knife, wolf, and dwarf. Okay, Old English also had the V, Z, and the F sounds in certain positions, mostly in between two vowels, but not at the beginning or end of a word. Old English also had a more limited use of these sounds, but because of an influx of French words, which really needed more of the V sounds, the sound was introduced in more positions in the word. For example, in the words zigzag, zinc, very, and virtue. Because of this influx of new words, these influx primarily, which was caused by external factors, because of various contacts with other languages, they actually contributed to how Old English sounds evolved. Now, these loans have a profound influence on the sound system of the Old English. Several sounds were added to what we call the phoneme inventory now, thus causing an internal change. That's why before we had vowel or consonant shifts. Okay, we have vowel changes, which really affected the words or the way words were pronounced before. We also had, apart from voicing, we also had palatalization. This one refers to the process of sound change in which a non-palatal consonant, for example, the k, changes to a palatal consonant like ch or sh. So starting in early Old English, the velar spelled this one as SC, C, and G are or were pronounced as k, k, and g, were fronted to these symbols, okay, or these sounds such as sh, ch, and the letter Y, ya, respectively. So if you look at this one very carefully, we have here the Old English. The spelling was like this, but it was pronounced as k, okay. But in the modern English, if it's spelled as sh, it's pronounced as sh. Okay, so these are the frontations. This is the best example of palatalization. Another one is that in Old English, if a letter or a symbol is sound or is spelled as this way, it was pronounced as k. But now, if it's spelled as tch, it's pronounced as ch. Same goes with this one. If it's spelled as g, it's pronounced as g. But now, if it's spelled as y, it's pronounced as ya. Okay. So before, the Old English, if it was pronounced or read as skip, okay, if you check on this, the modern English tells us that it's pronounced as ship. This is an example of palatalization, meaning there's a shift of a consonant sound to these sounds. Instead of saying dick before, okay, if you look at this one, now in modern English we say ditch. Before, if it was read as giolue, now it's read as yellow. A few more examples involve Old English words such as skirt becoming shirt, okay, such as disc to dish, scatter to shatter, kirk to church, and egg to eye. Now, in terms of palatalization, skirt and egg still exist in modern English because other Germanic languages did not undergo palatalization. Now, when Scandinavian came into contact with English, English borrowed the non-palatalized versions. That's why, if you notice here, the words skirt and egg still exist because these are actually some of the examples of these non-palatalized versions of words. Okay? Some of these words come to coexist with different meanings. For example, disc and dish. If before they were just versions of how they were pronounced, disc and dish in the modern English are two different words, same as skirt and shirt. While in other cases, one of the two forms wins. Okay? Apart from palatalization and voicing, you also had breaking. This occurs when the front vowels a, and e becomes diphthongs. Diphthongs wherein we have two vowel sounds. And these two vowel sounds are broken into sounds. For example, in this word, instead of E, before we had EO or EO. So before L or R and a C, such as in the word self, before it was pronounced as self, self. Okay? And then we have this one, E, EO, such as in the word Eor, and then A, Iya. Okay? This one, before H, as in the word Seya, for he saw. Okay, same goes with these examples presented here. Now, for breaking, as you can see from the modern English spelling, some of these words are now spelled the way they were before breaking occurred. This is an example of an irregularity in spelling. Now, aside from breaking, we also had fronting, which is also called as e-umlaut. A back vowel changes to the associated front vowel. This describes what happens when a back or low vowel, such as these vowels, precedes an E sound. Okay? Now, in Germanic language, before English separates from other Germanic languages, the form for singular mouse is this one, and plural mice is this one. Okay? E ending caused the fronting. Now, the E ending subsequently, or the I ending subsequently disappears, and the cause of the fronting becomes hidden. The non-fronted and fronted forms thus now form singular and plural pairs and intransitive and transitive pairs. For example, as in words, my mouse, we have mice, and for the word louse, lice, goose, geese, foot, feet, tooth, and teeth. For verbs fall, fell, sit, and set. Okay? These are all examples of fronting. Okay? A similar fronting and raising occurs in the pairs man and man, stank and stench, long and length, doom and dim, whole and heal, food and feed. Okay? So aside from the fact that there have been changes in terms of phonology or sounds in the Old English, we also have changes in terms of Old English grammar. So that is why it's very important to discuss Old English grammar. Old English, I believe, and it's said by different literature, is a synthetic language. There have been a use of a lot of word endings of inflections to indicate grammatical functions. Now, this is one determining feature of Old English: inflections. Okay, inflections really help a lot in indicating grammatical functions of words. So when you inflect, let's say, a suffix to a word in the Old English language, the word now becomes another grammatical entity. Okay, meaning it changes because of an inflection. This so-called grammaticalization, wherein the lexical meaning gradually disappears and the grammatical meaning prevails because of the inflections. So originally, words have lexical meanings, but grammatical meanings prevail because of inflections. Modern English has also lost the endings but gained words such as to. So before, there were no prepositions to and other determiners, but they also had a lot of inflections. In Old English, the verb is often at the end of the sentence, whereas in Modern English, it is in the middle, separating the subject and the object. So again, take note of this. In the Old English, the verb is often at the end of the sentence, meaning verb final. Old English was a verb final language, but in the Modern English now, the verb is located between the subject and the object of the sentence. Old English is also a synthetic language because there have been many free word order and many endings. There were also no small words such as da or tu before. And on one hand, modern English is an analytic language because it is a language with strict word order, few endings, and many small words. So in the modern English, if you notice, we follow a specific structure. Okay, we have syntactical formations. Okay, and we know that there are also specific languages that are verb initial, but the English language, it's not the case. Okay, it's totally different because the verb is found between the subject and the direct object. Okay, so let's now go to Old English morphology. Specifically, we have Old English pronouns. So for the Old English pronouns, there were variations in orthography. So spellings definitely varied. So for example, for the masculine singular accusatives, if you notice here, there are three variations for the spelling. So it could be spelled this way, or this way. Okay. Same goes with the third person plural nominative. Okay, wherein the third person pronoun functions as the subject, or accusative as the direct object of the sentence. This one. Okay, so if you notice, there are three spelling versions. Now, the Old English lists at least 13 forms of the third person singular masculine pronoun. That's according to the Old English Dictionary. There's also a rare dual number used for two people. So if there are two people already involved, there is a specific pronoun used for that. Now we know in the modern English we only have singular and plural, but before there were singular, dual, and plural. Okay, in terms of number. The instrumental case is almost extinct in the Old English. That's why the instrumental case usually is present in the modern English version. So if you look close at these Old English pronouns, you can see here, let's take a look at this one. The first person pronoun. So we have nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative case. If the first person pronoun functions as a subject, if it's singular, it's this one only. But if you notice, this is again a distinguishing feature of Old English pronouns before. There was this number called dual, and then we also have plural. Okay, so ik, if it's singular, if there are two people involved, it was with, and if it's plural, it was we. Okay, but it's a totally different story when we talk about Old English pronouns in the third person point of view. So we still have nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative, but there were no corresponding dual versions for these pronouns, only singular and plural. Now, what's different or what's unique about this one is that there are variations in terms of orthography. That means we can use any of these spellings or whichever we prefer to be used in an Old English text. Okay? So we have here an example of an excerpt coming from Beowulf. Now, in this example, there are three instances of the first person singular nominative ik. Okay, so if you notice, these instances of ik here show us that the first person singular nominative pronoun here was used as the subject of the sentence. There's also a plural second person nominative ge, which stays around at least until 16,000 as ye or ye. They pronounce as ye or ye. Okay? Another excerpt from Beowulf, you can see here, eom is similar to modern English am and seya to so. So ik here we know is a first person singular pronoun and then paired with eom. So if we are to translate this one, the first two words, these two words refer to I am. Okay. In terms of Old English morphology, we also have reflexive pronouns. Now, in the modern English, we have a lot of reflexive pronouns, most especially those pronouns ending with self. But myself and himself do not occur in the English except in later texts. Instead, the regular pronoun is used, such as me. So if you take a look at this excerpt, me was used in the sentence, not myself or not himself. The adjective self is typically used as an emphasis. Okay, for example, this one, the noble fighter himself with his followers. So the adjective self here was used not primarily as a pronoun in the sentence, but rather more of an adjective which functions as a reflexive pronoun. So the noble fighter himself with his followers. We also had Old English demonstratives, often translated by using the modern English article the, even though they are quite different. Okay, so if in the modern English we have the determiner or we have the article the before the usually limit the use of these little words. They call it little words. Demonstratives are not generally required in a sentence, such as in this one. But this one shows us an instance wherein the word the was used in an Old English text. Now, in terms of grammatical and natural gender, we have natural gender, which is simply the gender of a person, animal, or character. But they also had grammatical gender observed in the Old English text. It is a way of categorizing nouns. It doesn't necessarily match up with the natural gender of the person or object being described. And Old English used not natural gender, but grammatical gender instead. Now, in terms of Old English syntax, we have this concept of free word order. The word order is never totally free and adheres to some rules. Okay, we know that because in the modern English, we are very strict with how words should be ordered or presented in a sentence. Usually, pronouns occur near the beginning of the sentence. The verb often occurs at the end and can also occur in the second position or the verb second. Subject pronouns are somewhat more optional. But we had the so-called pleonastic or dummy or grammatical subjects such as there and it, which did not actually occur in the Old English. So for example, in the modern English, we say, it is the idea that I have in my mind. The it there functions as a pleonastic subject or a dummy or grammatical subject. If that exists in the modern English, but on one hand, in the Old English, the word it or there functioning as pleonastic subjects did not exist. Okay, there was also absence of auxiliaries, so auxiliary verbs were not used before in the Old English text. And there was also a construction that is called impersonal, since there need not be a nominative subject. So there are times wherein nominative subjects are not present in a sentence. So usually the construction becomes impersonal. Adverbs before were used as discourse markers, and the negative adverb often immediately precedes the verb. Okay. Now, in terms of Old English lexicon or the vocabulary, Old English vocabulary is very Germanic. You know that. Of the 30,000 words in the Old English, only 3% are non-Germanic. Okay, loan words are often longer, more precise, and limited in meaning. And you know that the English language had been widely influenced by different words. Usually, Old English lexicon was formed through compounding. That is the combination of two different words. But if you look at the Old English word, it is actually only one. For example, instead of saying angry spare, okay, the word used was Hrothgar. Okay, instead of saying no spirit, the word used is unferth. And instead of saying noble stone, the word used is Athelstan. So see, in the Old English lexicon, a single word is used to refer to two words in the modern English. Change in meaning of words. Words change in meaning, semantically speaking, in many ways. They can generalize or widen, but they can also specialize or narrow. So we have here different means on how words are changed. So we have narrowing, widening, metaphorical extension, and lastly is the shift. Let's talk about the first one, narrowing. In the Old English text, narrowing was very prevalent. Okay? For example, if you talk about the word deer, in the Old English, they simply say it's animal. But in the modern English, we know that a deer is a specific type of animal. Okay? In the Old English, they use the term hound, okay, for a dog. But now we know that in the modern English, a hound is just a dog of a breed used for hunting. Okay? Another one is the word meat. Okay, meat. In the Old English, it was referred to food. Okay? It does not necessarily mean that meat before meant um, pork, beef, or chicken. Okay? But in the modern English, meat is the flesh of an animal which is used as a food or consumed as a food. Aside from the narrowing, we also had instances of widening, wherein a meaning is widened. For example, the word barn. In the Old English, barn was used to refer to a place to store barley. But in the modern English, barn is a large farm building used for storing grain, hay, or straw, or for housing livestock. So if you notice, the scope widened. Okay, therefore, the meaning also widened. If you say tail, in the Old English, you might refer to hairy part on the backside of a horse. But in the modern English, tail may refer to the hindmost part of an animal, not necessarily the horse only. So aside from the widening and narrowing, we also had metaphorical extension. This is actually an example of a widening. For example, when you say crane, okay, we know that crane is a bird, but we could also say that a crane could be a mechanical device that looks like the bird. Okay, whether it is old or modern English, I should say that metaphorical extension exists in both. Okay, we also have shift. That is a change in meaning. So in the Old English, if we say toilet, you would mean cloth. In the modern English, toilet refers to a fixed receptacle into which a person may urinate or defecate. Or before, if you say clown, you're referring to a rural person, someone who's living in a rural area. But in the modern English, when you talk about clown, a clown is a comic entertainer, someone who's funny. Okay? So I believe those are the things that need to be discussed when it comes to Old English. Now, if I were to conclude, I think I would have to reiterate more on the changes that impacted or that affected the change or the evolution of the modern English language. If you notice, before Old English and Old English, there had been already a number of changes which contributed significantly to the modern English that we are using now. So regardless if they made it easier or more difficult for us to use the old or the English language now, it's good that we know about these changes so that we would appreciate more the transformation of the modern English from before Old English period to Old English period down to the rest of the periods, which later on improved the quality of modern English that we use as of the moment. So if you have further questions about this topic discussion, please post them in the open forum or you may comment down in this video. Thank you very much for listening.